Who exactly are the Nubians and what role did they play in ancient Egypt? Right now, we're going to do a deep dive of research into the land known as Tasseti, the land of the bow. A good place to start is with evidence. So, here's something called the Autobiography of Weni from Abydos. It's of a governor, well, a viceroy who was set up as governor of Upper Egypt, and he was in charge of Nubia when Pepi was in charge of Egypt. And this is what he had to say of the Nubians. When His Majesty took action against the Asiatic sand dwellers, His Majesty made me an army of men, many tens of thousands, from all of Upper Egypt, from Yebu in the south to Medinet in the north, from Lower Egypt, from all the two sides of the house, and from Sejer and Ken Sejeru, and from Irchet Nubians, Meja Nubians, Yam Nubians, Wawat Nubians, Kau Nubians, and from Techitland. His Majesty sent me at the head of his army, there being counts, royal seal bearers, sole companions of the palace, chieftains and mayors of towns of Upper and Lower Egypt, companions, scout leaders, chief priests of Upper and Lower Egypt, and villages and towns that they governed, and from the Nubians of those foreign lands. I was the one who commanded them, while my rank was that of overseer of royal tenants because of my rectitude. So right there we have evidence of Nubians being mentioned in person. And not only are they mentioned in person, but they are mentioned to have lived in Upper and Lower Egypt. But it is true that they were mainly found in Upper Egypt, and the evidence will be provided now. So there's a group of people known as the Beja people who live in the same areas that the Nubians would have lived, and they think they go as far as Ethiopia. But this group has been identified as the Medjay that was written about, and it's because their language is so similar to the language of the Medjay that, due to written sources, that we can conclude that the Beja are the people written about as the Medjay, and then are written about by the Greco-Romans as the Blemies. Although the Greco-Romans sort of mythologized them a little bit, making them, more powerful than they were in real life. Another way that we know that they are the same groups as these people is because of a custom, a burial custom. In early Kerma, Tumili were the chosen burial methods for Nubian pangraves. So these pangraves were something that we see throughout the history of Nubia, and they actually in prehistoric times seem to have been the culture of the ancient Egyptians themselves. And so this is why we think that the ancient Egyptians and the Nubians stem from the same place. As you can see in the final paragraph, it is written, in prehistoric times, there had been little distinction between Egyptian and Nubian burial particles, as both were laid in a contracted position in shallow graves. However, as time continues, Nubian cultures continued the contracted body tradition. In contrast, in Egyptian culture, the deceased were placed in an extended position. Now, for the idiots who doubted me when I said that the languages of North Africa were also spoken by Black Africans, here's the evidence. According to Peter Bridges and Marin Barkis Garist, linguistic evidence indicates that the C group people spoke Afro-Asiatic languages of the Berber branch. This thesis rests on somewhat sketchy and numerically insufficient lexical evidence. Recent evidence suggests that the C group people spoke an Afro-Asiatic language of the Cushitic branch. So for the people who want to separate Afro-Asiatic as just a Middle Eastern phenomena that entered Africa, you are wrong. Clearly here you have a branch of Afro-Asiatic that starts off in Africa, and they don't doubt that the Afro-Asiatic language was Afro-Asiatic. They only doubt that it's of the Berber branch. But this is why we believe that the Afro-Asiatic languages are African born, because there's so many variety of Afro-Asiatic languages in Africa, from the Cushitic type to the Berber type, and of course what they spoke in ancient Egypt, whereas the Afro-Asiatic type in the Middle East is only the Semitic branch. So that leads us to believe that because of variety, the Afro-Asiatic languages started in Africa. This is a map showing the Cushitic languages today and where they are placed. And keep in mind that these languages that are spoken today have got some influence from Arabic and other languages, whereas in the past they would have been more stemming from their own culture, which is why we know that they are a branch of its own. It's fine to say that these people existed in Nubia, but did they exist in Egypt? Well, here's the evidence. The evidence suggests that only a minority of Pangrave people lived in the Nile Valley, where they existed in small enclave communities among the Egyptian and Sea group population, being periodically used as desert scouts, warriors, and mine workers. The majority were probably desert nomads, breeding donkeys, sheep, and goats. After 600 BC, the Napatan Sea group dynasty lost control over, as well as the then rather desolate Lower Nubia. The next group of Nubians are the Wawat Nubians, and they lived in the northernmost part of Nubia, meaning that they were the closest to Egypt during ancient Egyptian times. And of course they have been relocated many times after that. They are actually known as the A group Nubian, and they start somewhere in 4th millennium BC. And as you can see, this article says, obviously this page says, that the Nubians were integrated into Egypt, but with the third immediate period, it becomes the center of an independent state of Kush based on Napata at some point, perhaps around 591 BC.